Research Capacity Development Unit. I'll be your moderator for this morning session, which is titled Survey Design and Digital Data Collection Techniques. Our facilitators for today, we have Prof. Mapela and also Dr. Rashid, who will be guiding us through this very important discussion. Before I can hand over to the facilitators, I would like to go through some few housekeeping rules. First of all, colleagues, this workshop is recorded. The reason for us to record this workshop is to share to all our communities, our platform, digital platforms, which is the module communities, the RCT management system, the RCT YouTube. So we'll upload all our workshops on those platforms. If you are not yet enrolled in any of the mentioned, you are more than welcome to send us an email on supervision calls or RCT inquiries, and myself and colleagues will be able to assist you regarding the registration. I'll also be sharing the feedback evaluation under the chat during the presentation or during the session. We kindly request you colleagues to take your 2 to 3 minutes to fill in the feedback. It helps us in terms of reporting, as well as to give feedback to our facilitators. So to Prof. Mapela and Dr. Rashid, we'll be sharing the feedback evaluation report as well as the attendance report for this particular workshop in about 3 days after the session. To the colleagues that have joined us, we kindly request that once your mic has been enabled, please do make sure that there is no background noise from your side that can disrupt or interrupt the proceeding of this session. However, we do encourage interactive engagement. So colleagues, if you do have any questions for the facilitators, you are more than welcome to just raise a hand or alternatively type under the chat. I will notify then the facilitator that someone has a contribution or a question to ask. If I may ask Prof. Mapela and to you, Dr. Rashid, will you prefer to take questions at the end of your presentation or during your presentation?
I'm okay with questions during the presentation. Mapela?
Same here. Same here, I'm okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, colleagues. To the colleagues, please make your contribution. I will then notify the facilitators that someone has a question either on the chat or if someone has raised their hand. So now, colleagues, with that being said, now allow me to formally introduce our facilitators. I would like to go through their bios, and therefore I will hand over to them to start with their presentation. I will start with Prof. Mapela. Prof. Mapela is a senior lecturer in the School of Economics at the University of Johannesburg, South Africa. Her expertise is in public policy, local development, and governance. She serves as an ethics chair in the School of Economics. She is also a member of the College of Business and Economics Research Ethics Committee and serves in the South African Defence Force Pools of Specialists. She is also a technical editor board member for the Gauteng Legislature monthly policy briefs. Her research focuses on service delivery, human remains management, local government development, and the challenges faced by emerging funeral directors in townships. She is a member of Ehlanzeni Human Remains Forum and has contributed to SMME education and training across all 9 provinces of South Africa. Colleagues, that is Prof. Mapela. I'm now going to read the bio of Dr. Rashid. Dr. Rashid is a senior lecturer in the School of Economics at the University of Johannesburg and a chair of the College of Business and Economics Decolonization Economic Frameworks Decolonization Committee. Sorry for that. Her scholarship interrogates mainstream economic frameworks, advancing more inclusive and contextually grounded approaches to understanding economic behavior and outcomes in the global South. She is committed to connecting economic theory to lived social realities. Her research sits at the intersection of inequality, history, and social justice. She brings this critical perspective to both the classroom and broader public discourse, fostering meaningfully engagement with the structural forces that shape contemporary South African society. Colleagues, let's warmly welcome our facilitators, Prof. Bulelwa and also Dr. Rashid. Thank you so much, colleagues, for joining once again. I'm now handing over to you, Dr. Rashid, and to you, Prof. Mapela. You can begin with your presentation. Thank you so much, colleagues.
I have a request to Dr. Rashid.
Yes, Prof.
Doc, may I please start, because I'm more of a storyteller and you are the technical person here when there is a need. So I think it would make sense if you take just after I've presented.
No
Is that
problem.
okay?
That's perfect. That's perfect.
Okay, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, Prof, we can see your screen, but it's not yet on presenter mode.
Okay, let me fix it. Okay, so today I will take you through, please call me Bulelwa. Whenever you want to ask a question, you can call me Bulelwa. I will take you through the different instruments that you may use when you want to collect data. I am largely on qualitative. Most of my students are qualitative students, just like their supervisor. So if I make examples that do not maybe reflect what you do, you can sort of raise your hand, then we will discuss it. And if I lose you somewhere, please do that. So here we start. I'm going to do the introduction, what this session will cover, why surveys, and when another method answers whatever question you would like to inquire better. What are the tools of inquiry? What is the difference between questionnaires, interviews, and observations? Rules to follow have been stated already. And how do you balance these scales? When do you know that for sure you've got to use a questionnaire, and for sure an interview guide would assist, and in some cases you will have to do observations. So now and again I will reflect on ethics, just because I do ethics. So when you're about to start your data collection process, the preparation would have been done when you are doing your proposal. You would have a picture of what is it that what kind of information that you need. You will also be assisted by your literature review process. What is it that is missing? Where are the gaps? And looking at your objectives, how best can you answer your objectives or your research questions? That leads you to identifying, is there a need for you to collect data? Is the data not already available? Or if it's available, what are the gaps within the data? That is when now you start navigating the thought process of designing a questionnaire corresponding with the methodology you would have stated already that you seek to follow. So there are different methods of inquiry. So we would have a questionnaire. A questionnaire is a standardized document with questions, mainly for those who are in quantitative. You want to measure opinions or behaviors. Then, with an interview guide, largely qualitative, but in some instances, you find that when we are reviewing ethics, you find a combined research instrument. The other section would be where one can be able to collect the quantitative data, but you'll find that at the end, it's open-ended questions or in-depth insights that are required from the respondents. So one can sort of separate those, but make sure that you do not mix the two. You must make sure that, okay, this is an interview guide, this is a questionnaire. If you happen to have everything in one document, there must be a section that, okay, here, the data that I need is for my analysis. The data that I need from this section is for me to tell a story. Then in some instances, you need to do observations, which are a bit sensitive. It depends on what is it that you want to observe. For instance, you can't observe people engaging in illegal activities. We won't allow you as the university because we care about your safety. We want you to always make sure that whatever you do when it comes to data collection, you are safe, because if we allow you to do such and something happens to you, we are in trouble. So observations are a bit tricky, but in some normal studies where the participants allow you to observe them before you can talk to them or after I've spoken to them, it's okay. Where there is no risk, it's fine. So what you normally do is, when you do an interview guide, in some instances, like for instance, my research, which is in human remains management, at some point I have to do observations. I have to go to the cemetery and see what happens and how many burials and how do they do this. Are the processes standardized, or it depends on the ability or affordability of that particular funeral director. So I look at those, but I cannot do those without having the approval from the university. So if you state in your research instrument that you're also going to be doing observations, we need to make sure that you will be safe. We need to make sure that the participants won't be undermined in the process. And the reason for the observations must be justified. So the difference between all these, it depends on exactly what is it that you need to answer and how do you want to answer it. So what is a questionnaire? Like I said, it is a set of standardized questions where you want to understand the behaviors so that you can do a descriptive analysis, you can run models and all that. You'll find that you give each and every question a code so that your analysis can be easier, as opposed to an interview guide. There, you allow people to give insights, to tell you a story. You know what you need. You may ask someone as to how do you get to town? And then someone decides to tell you about what they start with in the morning and the streets that they have to cross. It doesn't matter. You will find that when it comes to an interview guide, but you know exactly what is it that you need for your analysis. So it's important, again, your methodology must be in line with the instrument, or vice versa. The instrument must be in line with the methodology. Then we find that mostly students, they would say, I'm doing a mixed method in their research. And you only find that there is an interview guide. But because in ethics, we are not allowed to monitor the supervisor, all you can do is to advise, to say, but relook at your methodology, because you said you want the insights, but in your methodology, you are stating that it is a mixed method, meaning that you've got a quantitative side of it, you've got a qualitative side of it. So these are the nuances that the supervisor will walk you through with, so that you can be able to make a clear distinction ultimately for your analysis. That's the only reason. So the stages of questionnaire design. Sorry, I keep on receiving these emails that these messages that I must accept people. So you must define the construct. What are you measuring? If you want to understand as to why people behave in a certain way, ask exactly that. And if you're not sure, because research differs, if you're not sure once the questionnaire has been constructed already, if you're not sure, go back to your questions and your objectives and see. That is why we talk about pre-testing sometimes, or in most cases. So the sequence of the questionnaire is important. You can't be asking about where did Bulelwa study, and then immediately you ask me about where do I go to when I want to go to church, or how do I spend my time when it comes to recreation. There must be a sequence. Why is that? It is ethical, number one. Number two, it is for the respect of the participants. Do not confuse them. So there must be a sequence. This also assists you in the way that when you ask the questions in sequence, already the respondent is willing to engage, because once they give you answers in the first category and then you ask them according to the second category, they would also reflect on what they've said before. So the results that you are going to get are going to be validated by what they said initially. So if your questionnaire is everywhere, it becomes a problem when it comes to maybe putting your answers in a spreadsheet, when it comes to coding, when it comes to analysis. It's very, very important. And it's not a nice task sometimes for students, because all they want to do is to submit to the supervisor, I have done the questionnaire, here's the questionnaire. And most of the time, the supervisor is dealing with a lot of students. At least the best you can do is to make sure that you follow the sequence as per your research questions and your objectives. So the content and how you phrase your questions is very, very important, so that you can be able to capture the information that you need. I will give you examples towards the end of a bad question and a good question. And then you've got to test your instrument. You've got to pre-test your instrument, because if you don't do that, what's going to happen is you would have applied for ethics already, you go to the field, and then when you get the response, you can see that no, something is missing here. Whereas if you tested before, you would know exactly where to go and change and adjust. And that is also going to assist you to go back to your methodology and see if it's still in line with what you are already capturing from the data collection process. Then after that, you can finalize your questionnaire. Maybe the question would be, where do you do this pre-testing? So when we review ethics, we have a leeway for you to say, okay, I've applied for ethics and it has been granted. However, when I'm collecting the data, these are the changes that I'm finding. So it's easy for us to go back to the original review and make adjustments for you. It's not going to waste your time, rather than collecting data that is not going to be usable. I'm not seeing any questions. So if there are questions, please stop me, Chair. So the interview guide.
So far, there are no questions. I think you are good to proceed. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, thank you so much. So coming to the interview guide, if you've defined your research focus, clarify the purpose, list the key topics and what you need to understand. Of course, you don't have to sort of thumbs up this. Doesn't need intelligence. You've got your proposal, you've got your main research question and your main research objective and the subsections. Then you follow that. What is it that you need to know? And what is it that is missing from the literature? So if you look at those aspects, at least we can say you are almost 85% correct with the instrument that you have. Then you develop the core questions, the subsections. This I need to know as per my objectives, and what would be the sub-prompts from the main prompt. You follow that process until the end of your research instrument and structure the flow, as I've stated with your questionnaire, structure the flow. Don't let your participants be everywhere, because your results would be confused. And when you are trying to load now the information or document the information, now you've got to think, okay, why did they say this? And remember, when you do data collection, sometimes the respondents, they want to tell you a whole lot of things. And some of the things that I'm telling you, there's no time to capture those down. I'm talking from experience because I collect my own data. There's no time. So you write notes, but if there is a flow in your instrument and you've got notes everywhere, at least you would recall that in this section, I've got these red notes, but what were they all about? If the section is straightforward and there's sequence, you don't get confused. You've got a thicker story and a richer story to tell. So again, you've got to pilot and refine. Now, when it comes to piloting, I don't know, but for my sake and for my studies when I was doing my PhD, I was in Soweto campus. I used the people, the admin that was working in Soweto campus, the drivers, auxiliary services, just for them to reflect, for me to see, because I wasn't going to do anything with their responses, for me to see and reflect on my methodology and the way I have sequenced the questions. So I was able to go back now and refine my research instrument for a takeoff. So there are different theories when you're...
To interrupt, there's a question under the chat.
Yes.
I think from the previous slide from Tendai. What is an adequate sample for piloting the questionnaire?
There are always formulas. I'm sure Dr. Rashid can help us with that. There are always formulas. What I do with my students, because we are on doing an action research and it's a technical report, mostly our sample size would be about 30 observations. That is allowed, but other studies differ. I sit with ethics application of about 120 participants, which is the sample. Some are smaller. When you're speaking to industry specialists, the sample is going to be smaller. It depends on your study and the methodology. But if you're not certain, you can always use the formula to say, if the population is this much, what is it that I would need for a reasonable sample size? So it depends. I can't say it's 5%, it's 20% of what. It depends on the population.
Thank you for it. I see, sorry, Prof. I see there's a hand from Dr. Rashid. Probably she wants to add something to what you have just said.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yes,
Prof, are you done? Sorry, I interrupted you. Were you done?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Tendai, just to add to what Prof has mentioned, so with sampling, it's also important to look at what is what are your people of interest, or what is your unit of analysis? So for example, in some studies, because whatever it is people are looking into, there's very few of those. So for example, in the just transition research, there are very few independent power producers that one can actually survey. So in that specific body of literature, to have 10 IPPs, that's pretty normal because you have a very, very small IPP sector in South Africa. But if you are, looking at something where you have to interview individuals, the literature does say that 50 is the ideal sample size. It's a very arbitrary number, but I think it's just to give people a ballpark figure that they can work with. Even when you're looking at other papers out there, have a look in your area based on whatever research you are doing. Have a look at what are the other articles, what's the average sample size that they use, because that will also give you an idea of what is acceptable in not only, in your study itself, but many of you here are going to be publishing your work. So that'll also give you an idea of what's the accepted norm, in your publication sphere. Thanks, Prof.
Okay, Tendai also have the following question, follow-up question. Can the pilot sample be part of the main study?
Well, what I would accept what I would accept when it comes to reporting in your methodology, you would state that you piloted the instrument and this is what you found. For maybe an article, you can explain that, but it depends on the supervisor as to what is their preference. But for my PhD study, I did not mention anything about the sample size that I used for piloting, except that the instrument, it did go through the pilot session. That I did mention, but I did not mention what came out because the questionnaire ultimately was revised. So I was just justifying why I mentioned it. It was to justify that for validity purposes, I did pilot the instrument and the instrument has been adjusted.
Okay, I see the hand from Dr. Rashid. You can go ahead.
Thanks, Nkosietu. So just to Tendai, to add to what Prof has mentioned, also think about how large your pilot is. So if you, for example, interviewing township business owners, your pilot might need to be a lot bigger compared to if you're interviewing independent power producers in the Western Cape, for example. So again, it also depends on who it is you are interviewing. And obviously, the larger your pilot, what I always advise my students to do is include the pilot in the ethics application, because you don't want to now be conducting a pilot outside of, the ethical boundaries that are set for us. So even if my pilot is like 2 or 3 companies, I still include that within my ethics application, just so that I'm covered within the university framework. And so that when I publish the work, at least the pilot itself is also covered in the ethical aspects of the study. Thanks, Prof.
Thank you. As I said, that it depends on the supervisor. I wouldn't disqualify a student for doing that, but if they just justify how they refined their instrument, the process that they took, which is piloting the instrument, I'm fine with that. But again, it depends on the supervisor. But whatever you do, for as long as you're able to justify, going back to the sample, for if you're going to have a smaller sample, there must be a justification for that. There must be a reason for that. Like what Prof is saying, Dr. Rashid is saying, if you are going to be speaking to a few companies, it's because there are a few players in the market. You would have justified that within your methodology to say, why my sample size is this small? It's because of this. But then if you're going to be talking to small businesses within the townships, if your sample is small, again, there must be a reason which might be frowned upon. Can we move on?
Yes, Prof, you can move on now. Thank you.
Thank you. So I tried to look at the theories for questionnaire design or an interview design. So the first theory would be total survey error framework. So what does it mean to the researcher? Are you covering the right people? Is the sampling selection correct? Which is what we've just discussed. What does the non-response mean to you? Could it be that you are not covering the right people? People would like to respond, but they don't have the information for you. But since they know that there are challenges with water supply or water shedding, they want to say something, but actually the information that you need, it should come from the municipal officers or from the engineers. So the measurement, is it well presented in your methodology so that it can assist you with your analysis and your processing? How are you going to process this information? So hence we talk about the piloting of the instrument, because you'll be able to cover all these tracks. Then we've got the cognitive response theory. What you are asking the people on the ground, if that is the case, do they comprehend what you need from them? can the participant retrieve information from the previous questions, or can they retrieve information because they experience this phenomenon on daily basis? And how do you use your judgment? If you're speaking to Bulelwa, she stays in a township, and you're asking me questions, how do you tell if I know or I don't? This would have been covered by your sampling technique. Who is it that you want to talk to? Sorry for my spelling. And your response. How do I map the scales? Okay. If Bulelwa is experienced in this, how best can I ask her so that I can get the information that I need from her? In a scale of 5, how best does she know about this issue that is taking place currently? So if I'm an expert in a field, or if I'm a township dweller and we struggle with water, how does that impact us? On a scale of 5, are the municipalities servicing us? Are they giving us information? Do we get notification before there can be water shedding? I'm a township dweller. I'll be able to tell you exactly and give you the right scale for your analysis. But if I know nothing, I'm just a young person in this space. I arrive at home, there's water already, and then I leave. In the morning, there's water. During the day, someone has to gather water and you come and speak to me. I wouldn't give you the correct scales. I would say now and again, oh, once there was no water. But if you speak to the right people that you have chosen as per your sample, you can be able to get the right scales. And then we've got the social exchange theory. Now, this is what I experience when I go and collect my own data. This is what I observe when I'm reviewing ethical clearance applications. What is it that the communities are getting in return when we take time away from them? What is it that they're supposed to get? According to the research protocol, we can't offer them anything, except that we've got to be mindful of them not spending anything when it comes to them engaging with us. We've got to be mindful of their time, their effort and risks. How do we ensure that we are mindful? You find a questionnaire with about 30 questions, or an interview guide with about 30 questions, which is going to take an hour. We understand you're a researcher, you need this information, but have you considered that you're not giving anything back? So how can you best minimize the time, the effort, the cost of course? If there are going to be costs involved, then you've got to carry the cost as the researcher. But I've noticed that as researchers, sometimes we forget about the time of the participants. They don't owe us anything. So we've got to be mindful. And sometimes certain studies, they involve a risk. Is this person, though we are not going to, there's going to be a non-disclosure, but are they safe when they respond to us? Not physical safety, but are they free? Are they free? Does this research not pose a risk to them? We've got to be mindful of those. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't carry that research. That's why we've got ethics recs to make sure that we protect you and the participants. So we've got the mode of effects theory. How do you determine what you need? Are you going to just ask a person, give them the consent form and not explain anything, and then start asking them questions or try and get their insights? You need to engage with them so that they can be comfortable. After the engagement with you, they shouldn't be left like wondering, what was that all about? And how are you going to do this? Is it going to be a face-to-face? If it's going to be a face-to-face, why is it going to be face-to-face? Well, I do face-to-face. I know researchers prefer online. For both methods, there's a downside. Face-to-face, you may chase people for the whole time or the whole day or the whole week or the whole month. With online, you can wait forever. What is the best way? It depends on what you want to achieve. It really depends on how you want to achieve it. So you must have patience. You must be prepared to always send emails to say, please, this is a reminder. Or if it's a face-to-face, you must be able to say, okay, when can I come and see if they are willing to respond? One of the examples, the stuff that I'm experiencing right now, I'm collecting data from the government mortuaries. I would have an appointment. I would arrive there on a Monday and it's 12 o'clock. I would be told that today it's a busy day. Can you please come on a Thursday? I arrive on a Thursday, then I'm told that the bosses are in a meeting. Does that mean that it's a pointless exercise for me? No, it needs patience because there is no reward for the communities when they engage with us. Now we've got the validity theory. I'm measuring exactly what you intended to measure as per your questions and your objectives, your methodology, and what you envisage to tell at the end in terms of your results and recommendations. So what are the types of questions you may have, which is going to be a questionnaire where you have contingency questions. It's a cascaded format. Sometimes you will have matrix questions whereby there are scales. Sometimes when it comes to interview guides, you will have close-ended questions to say, okay, what do you think about A, B, C, and D? What is your view? And then open-ended questions, you allow the participant to tell you whatever they want to tell you pertaining a certain inquiry. So the questioning here when it comes to number one. So the respondents here when it comes to contingency questions, they only respond as per how they are asked, yes or no. The matrix question for the participant can be monotonous. I tick, I click, I tick, I click. They don't think because they are tired. They are overly researched. The close-ended questions. Sometimes you find the communities, this is from experience, they're in a mood. I don't think so. I don't agree. Or yes. Yeah, some other time it was like that. Whereas when it comes to the open-ended, though they are harder to code, but you allow someone to be out of whatever zone you found them in to say, okay, actually it's something that is not sitting well with me. I may as well say it. Or actually, we like what the municipality is doing if only they can improve by implementing A, B, C, and D. So you capture a rich data. But I'm not saying that this is the best amongst all the other three methods. So the methods we've discussed, face-to-face, sometimes it's telephonic, mostly it's by Teams, mailing, it's no longer working, or online questionnaire where someone receives a link, you are asked to respond, and you know what happens when you receive a link. You can tell a story right now. The follow-up is hard. Mailing, we won't talk about it. Telephonic, you must really, 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 really be patient to keep on phoning if you follow that route. Face-to-face is costly and slow. Again, this is from experience. It's costly and slow, but I prefer it because I know that once I get a participant to sit down with me, I'm going to get rich information from them. So in a day, it may happen that judging as per your time constraints, in a day, it may happen that you only spoke to 2 people. On a bad day, sometimes it's 1 or no one. So it really depends. Now for students, we normally advise them against certain methods of collecting data because we look at their time frames. So the best one would be to send an online questionnaire, but they come back and say, I've been waiting ever since. So what are the examples of poorly developed instruments? If the language is too complex for a certain particular group, not specialist, If you're speaking to specialists in policy development, that's different. But if you're speaking to the masses, to the communities, the English must be simple. It must be simple. So be mindful of leading questions or stereotyped questions. Then again, sometimes if you get vague questions, it's something that you would have corrected when you are doing the piloting. So if you're getting this, it means you did not do the piloting. It means you've got to go back because the results would be unusable. Sometimes people refuse to respond to an inquiry because they feel that the inquiry is intrusive. What are you going to do about that? We advise you when we review your application for ethics that you may come across this, but we are not allowed to say it's impossible. Sometimes the wrong wording counts when it comes to collecting data. So you've got to be mindful of the wording. Who are you talking to? Simple English. Or if you're speaking to specialists, use the correct wording for them not to think that, okay, what are they trying to say? Oh, they actually talking about the infrastructure here. Use the right wording. Of course, you would have gathered the right wording because you would have done the literature review. I'm about to finish. So implications of a poorly designed instrument. Sometimes the information is unusable. You would have wasted money. Wrong decisions might be taken, and there may be low response or high dropout, and the credibility of the results will be questionable. And you can't track the trends within your analysis. What is it that is missing? Sometimes it's the research instrument. So here, I'm about to finish. Here are a few examples of a good and a bad instrument. So a bad question would be, don't you agree that the municipality's water service delivery is terrible and unreliable? That is wrong. We are asking many things in one sentence or one question. What kind of a response are you expecting? Whereas a good question would be, in the last 30 days, how many times was your household water supply interrupted for more than 6 hours? You are specific and you know what you want to measure. Another example would be, rate the adequacy of the primary water reticulation infrastructure. Reticulation infrastructure, it's a jargon to someone like me in the township. But a good example of a question would be, how satisfied are you with the quality of tap water in your home? You know, as a researcher, that you also want to talk about the infrastructure. But if I tell you that in the last 6 hours, this is what we've been experiencing. In the last 3 months, this is what we've been experiencing. Sometimes there are best pipes there. They take time to come and fix them. Even if they come and fix the pipes, the following day is the same story. You know that there's a problem with the infrastructure. You can make an inference. Any questions? So for qualitative, I won't go into those because I'm looking at time, in the interest of time. So now it depends on how now you want to tell your story, on how you want to do your analysis. So sometimes you can narrate. Quantitative with the right instrument, it's easy for you to interpret. And a good instrument will also allow you to make an inference. So then what? What I'm advocating for here is know which instrument you're going to use and why. You justify. If it's going to be an interview guide, you've got to explain in your methodology as to why. If it's going to be a questionnaire, explain why. If you're going to include observations, explain why. And do the testing. After you've followed all the examples that I've given you, do the testing. Then after that, you can collect your data and you can be safe. at least have a degree of certainty that when I do my analysis, 85% of what I'm going to get from the analysis will allow me to make an inference, will allow me to make recommendations. That is very, very important. So I will give over to Dr. Rashid so that she can continue. I'm here. If there are questions, I will address them before Dr. Rashid can start.
Thank you so much, Prof. Mapela. There are no questions at the moment. However, I'll advise the colleagues who have questions to just type those questions under the chat or just raise your hand, and therefore I'll enable everyone's mic. Actually, let me just enable everyone's mic. So if you do have any question, you can just raise your virtual hand and unmute your mic.
Thank you. Dr. Rashid, over to you.
Thank you, Prof. Mapela. I just want to share my screen while we wait for questions.
Dr. Rashid, we can see your presentation. I think you can proceed. We'll take questions as they come.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nkosietu. And thanks, Prof. Mapela, for the fantastic introduction. So I'm just going to be building on what Prof mentioned, just some best practices and just some tips that we can share from all of the different data collection projects that we have undertaken. So I think before you even embark on any qualitative data collection, remember that qualitative is not better than quantitative, and quantitative is not better than qualitative. Each of them serve a distinct purpose. So even a mixed methods methodology serves a very, very distinct purpose. It's not there to, prove that you are better than your counterparts or people in science are better than people in humanities. So before you start any study, I think it's so important to just bear in mind that everything that we do in research, we don't have 100% certainty in what we are doing. Technically, everything that we are doing is very, very refined within our samples. So for all we know, we might be wrong. But in some contexts, because we draw useful conclusions, that usefulness is what adds value. So make sure you think about that before you begin your study. There's a lot of discomfort around methodologies in general. So make sure you solidify your why and your purpose in your mind. All methods are there to add value. Just to elaborate on what Prof mentioned in terms of validity. So make sure you are asking a question that gives you the answer that you need. I'm not saying now fudge the question or make it like a leading question. I'm saying make sure you are measuring the correct thing. So if you are keen on life satisfaction, for example, then make sure your question leads directly or asks directly about life satisfaction. Obviously, you can't make it a leading question and prompt the person to give you a specific answer. But if you're asking a life satisfaction question that's actually talking about income, you're not getting the information that you need from the person. So as Prof. Mapela mentioned, going around asking colleagues or maybe even family members, running the survey by a few people might help you to figure out if there are validity issues even before you do your pilot. This is now as you are designing the questionnaire itself, even before your ethical clearance, as you are designing the question. So right at the beginning. So ask yourself, does this question measure what I think it measures? Or is it measuring something else, but that is also important, but is not exactly what I'm looking for? So in your mind, you must be able to link the question to one of your specific research sub-questions. If you cannot do that, then you know that there's a bit of a linkage issue, that there's a bit of a, you might be linking the wrong information to the wrong research question. So that is something that I also always do, is for every research question that I have in my study, I make sure that it is linked explicitly to a question on the questionnaire, so that I can very easily map where the information is going once I've gathered the information. Reliability is also something, look, reliability means consistency. So coming up with questions that produce consistent results. But obviously in a South African context, you're dealing with populations that are, as Prof mentioned, very saturated already. In the townships particularly, people don't want to be asked, they're busy trying to make a living, they're struggling to survive. They do not want to be asked the same question in a different way. So I understand, maybe in the global north, reliability is, I don't know, more convenient or easier for people to do. And maybe people are more amenable to it there in the global north. But in the global south, I do find that having these questions where you can test reliability does become a little bit problematic. So make sure at the beginning you bear that in mind. Read through papers in your area and see how do they account for reliability concerns. Especially if you're doing township economy research, have a look at how all the leaders in the field, how are they finding innovative ways to make sure that the instruments that they are using actually help them gather reliable information. So an example of that would be asking the same question, but in a different way, to see whether you get a similar answer. But obviously, if someone is pressed for time, they're trying to, run a business, they're not going to have time for that much of the same, repetition. So you got to be a little bit more crafty about how you ask questions in certain settings. So another way to look at it is, if your respondent took a survey, the same survey that you are doing with them today, if they took it next week, would they answer in the same way? So make sure your questions are unambiguous and you actually are asking them questions in a non-deceiving, I know deceiving is a bit of a strong word, but in a basically in a true way. How are you getting the exact answer from them consistently over time? Prof mentioned the different kinds of questions. So obviously you can use quantitative information or qualitative information to code quantitative information, right? You can take qualitative data and code it in a certain way to come up with, you can take qualitative data, code it in a certain way, and it can become quantitative data, but you have to be very careful about how you do that. And obviously within the quantitative data realm, you can't do that too much into all of your questions, because then that creates certain biases within your calculations and your stats. So mixed methods, research, qualitative research, quantitative research, they all have their merits, but they also have their weaknesses. So you must know what your core purpose is. And that's why I put this column here. It's very important to know, what do you want from this? What are you trying to ascertain? Again, matching your research questions, your studies research questions to your questionnaires research questions. That will really help you solidify your key purpose. So I think, and Prof alluded to it earlier, I think she said the words were, you have to make sure that you are using the correct terminology and for the correct audience, asking it in the correct way, making it as simplistic as possible. One way to make sure that you do that is to make sure your purpose is linked to your questions, is linked to your research aim, your main question. So don't rush. I think the main issue is when people are in a rush, then they tend to, and I've seen it even with some of my co-researchers and students as well, what they do is they rush because they want to show some sort of deliverable. Prof also mentioned this before. They rush through a survey. When you go through the survey, you can already see, okay, no, these questions, number one, they're not clear. Number two, they're not linking to the main research question. Number three, they're not linking to any sub-question. So the core purpose is critical, and you have to spend a lot of time on it. Even if you take double the time, like say you were supposed to design something, say in 2 weeks, even if you take 4 weeks, but you give a better quality questionnaire to your co-researcher or your supervisor, that's better, because when you send incomplete things, it's actually going to frustrate them. So make sure that you really, really think about what you want to do and why you are doing it. Something that Prof mentioned earlier about understanding. So making minor adjustments to words, even in an indigenous language, can change your responses by up to 20%, is what research shows. So it's very important that even if you are choosing to use an indigenous language, you use it correctly. Obviously, if you don't speak the language fluently, that might make it a little bit more difficult for you to converse on the ground. So make sure if you are using an indigenous language, try to work with field workers or co-researchers, or have a team that is fluent in the language, because you don't want things to also get lost in translation, especially in South Africa. There are lots of important things that are lost in translation between English and an indigenous language, and then that is missed in a study, and those are the important things that you actually want to come out in the study. Avoid double-barreled questions. I know it's tempting. You sometimes want to force everything into one question. But try and make each question on your questionnaire a unique question. Otherwise, the respondent is going to get a little bit distracted, and then they might only want to respond to the first part or the last part, and then you're getting incomplete information as you are going. So avoid double-barreled or one question with too many parts in it. Leading and loaded questions, don't sort of put words in the respondent's mouth. Yes, Prof.
Thank you so much, Doc. In the interest of the participants, of late we even find a whole paragraph of a question from a student, and this has gone to the supervisor. And remember, we are not allowed to supervise the supervisor, but you worry about a student as to how are they going to unpack this to the participants. So to make things easy for you, because you'll be alone, sitting alone doing the analysis, please be straight to the point. Maybe that paragraph, make 3 questions out of it, but it mustn't be double-barrel question to the respondents, because they will give you everything that at the end of the day you find that you cannot use it. Whereas if you're direct, it helps. Just wanted to add that.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. And just to also on the flip side, when it comes to leading and loaded questions, neutral wording often helps you produce honest answers. You want your respondent to feel as though they are in a safe space and they can be honest with you, and they can, speak freely. Obviously, if you use too many technical terms, as Prof mentioned, and too much jargon, your audience, you might miss them totally. You might not get any reasonable information from them. So sometimes asking a question in a very simple form is more effective. You can bring in your jargon and your terminology, and all of the academic stuff when you're analyzing the data. You'll have your time to bring all of that in. So don't feel like if you ask a question in a basic way, it's a bad thing, or it's going to reduce the value of your research. It's not going to do that. It's actually going to help you get the kind of data that you are looking for. Okay, digital. Now in South Africa, I would say that digital is tricky, especially if you're doing local economic development or township economy research. The only time I feel, and Prof. Mapela, you have far more experience and you can guide us here, but the only time I feel like digital is useful in the township economy sense is if the person asking the question is maybe using a device to capture the answers. I don't feel like giving a township business owner an electronic survey to complete is going to be like a wise thing, because not everyone is proficient with these sorts of tech. Not everyone is proficient in English. Not everyone has the time to actually sit and type things out and, punch onto a device, So sometimes you can do it in a mixed way. You can have everything electronic for yourself, but for you to capture and so on. But it's very important that the person you are speaking to, is able to answer in a way that is comfortable for them. And sometimes that means letting go of tech in that moment. Prof?
Thank you. Doc, I would say it depends on your participants. And I'm saying this with caution. Hope it doesn't get me into trouble. If you look at the environment right now in South Africa, we are struggling with a whole lot of things, and there are trust issues. So you go to communities, you are carrying a recording device. Are you going to be trusted? There's nothing wrong with that. Whereas if you go to people who are specialists, maybe the technocrats, they understand, they don't mind, they understand why you are doing the study. There won't be problems. Then again, it depends. I'm not against anything, but when we deal with communities, we need to recall that they are doing us a favor by listening to us because they have hope, but we have to return that by showing some respect, ubuntu, to engage with them, to talk to them. But I'm not against, if they allow you to record, it's okay. If they allow you to record. So the devices, it depends on who you are engaging with, the group, your sample size, and the characteristics of that group. It really depends on that. So you've got to be on the lookout. Who am I talking to? And would it be okay for me to use a device? Thank you, Doc.
No, I agree. I agree with Prof. And it's also good to be sensitive to what the respondents might find uncomfortable. So in a way, you have to, even before you go out and survey, you must, in a way, understand what the dynamics are on the ground. So sometimes that's why if you're doing a study in townships, it might be best to work in a township maybe that's near you or that you are familiar with, because you understand already the dynamics in the township. You know how things work. You know what's possible. You know whether mobiles or recordings or things like that are going to work. The same goes for your SMS surveys. It's not advisable in your township settings, but obviously if you're dealing with maybe municipal managers who have the time and the resources to do that, then that's fine. As Prof mentioned, it is dependent on who your audience is, but I just want to caution against those of you who are doing township economy research, because I have seen it in the past where people have these elaborate electronic instruments and they, go to the township and they expect the business owner to now fill this out. And it's a very unrealistic thing. Your business owner is very busy. And number one, they don't have time, to navigate all these difficult apps and things, and they're probably just going to reach saturation much quicker and say, oh, this thing is such a menace, I'm giving it up and I don't care what the outcome is. So you have to be very, very sensitive to who your respondents are and design your questionnaire, your focus groups, whatever you're doing, design them with that in mind, with your audience, with your respondents in mind. Some colleagues do use, as I mentioned, the smartphone to assist with data capturing. They also assist themselves. And sometimes a smartphone helps you as the data collector to focus on one question at a time. So I know a colleague of mine, a student of mine about 4 years ago, was in Limpopo province, and he found it easier for him to load everything onto his device so that he could focus on one question at a time as he was interviewing community members. So it helped him focus, it helped him not to digress, and it also helped him to channel the information that he was getting to the different questions. So as Prof. Mapela mentioned, sometimes the person that you are interviewing wants to tell you everything all at once, but that's important, right? That's good information. So sometimes using a device might help you to order that information, sometimes not. I'm not a device person myself. I feel like talking and, having that one-to-one, in an old school kind of way works for me. It helps me understand the person's situation. But obviously, younger groups of people find that devices are, a more effective use of their time. So it's entirely up to you and up to the respondents, but please be cognizant of these sorts of technicalities. Even if you are doing smartphone questionnaires with municipal managers or company owners or executives, bear in mind that they also reach saturation. They also have, many things to do in the day, and they might end up dropping out of a survey because it's too long. So just make sure that you cater for your respondents adequately. There are lots of tools that you can use out there. I won't go into the tools in too much detail, but I just want to list them here just to give you an idea. Obviously, the most popular ones would be your Google Forms and SurveyMonkey. SurveyMonkey is very, very easy to use, and it's also free. But obviously some of them, and I'm not sure if SurveyMonkey does that now, but sometimes they have a cap on how many people you can survey, at a particular moment in time. So make sure you read through that and you understand what the terms and conditions are before you decide, because the last thing you want to do now is design your entire survey on one platform only to realize that, they only allow 10 responses for free, and after that you have to pay. So just be very careful about which one you want to use. You can obviously go and look into toolboxes and ODK, Survey CTO, all these different apps, and see which one will work for you based on who you will be interviewing. Sometimes a Google form is excellent for the corporates. If you're interviewing, maybe if you're doing competition research, you want to look into different firms and firm level behavior, a Google form would be better, because sometimes the person in between their meeting, they'll quickly fill out the form and send it to you. So for an executive or for a manager or for someone in a company, that might be effective. So just make sure you are matching your tool to your context.
Sorry, Dr. Rashid,
Yes.
to interject. There's a question from the chat from Jonathan. The question reads, according to UJ ethical clearance, is there any limits in terms of validity of data collected? Is it 5 years, 10 years, etc.?
Okay, I think that's a great question, Jonathan. Prof. Mapela, if you wouldn't mind advising us on that one, I know that is your expertise.
Thank you. Currently, in the School of Economics, it's 3 years, but there's been discussions within the REC of the faculty that we need to extend it. That decision hasn't been taken. But I am not saying it's the same across board, but the minimum that I know of, it's 3 years.
Okay, I see there's a follow-up from Jonathan. How long does the ethical clearance committee take to approve a survey exercise?
I can answer that. It's going to get me into trouble though, but I don't think I do mind, honestly. As a research institution, amongst other things, researchers are very, very important and they must be prioritized. So with CBE, my understanding is the turnaround time, it's 2 weeks. It differs across different schools. I don't know with other faculties. Within SOE, the turnaround time is normally 72 hours. It doesn't mean that your application is approved, but it's 72 hours so that we can engage with you to say, here are the comments, here we don't understand, but ultimately the whole institution, I am not sure, but my understanding is if we follow the term ethics, a researcher shouldn't be left with anxiety, wondering when is this going to happen. They're not supposed to wait for too long. And yes, we are busy because this is just an administration job. But if you agree to take it, you've got to live up to the term ethics. So you've got to make sure that the researcher is not experiencing anxiety. So what I know about CBE, it's 2 weeks. The turnaround time is 2 weeks. I don't know elsewhere.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof, for that response. I hope, Jonathan, you are well answered. I think at this moment, Dr. Rashid, you can proceed. I'll let you know should any question come.
Thanks, Prof. Thanks, Nkosieto. Another thing that is very, very common in today's research world is AI. It's a fantastic tool. You can use AI for lots of learning, lots of exploration, but be very careful. Even though AI is a very useful tool, unfortunately, it is abused in certain instances. So when you have a web-based survey, you have to think very carefully about whether the web-based survey was not filled in by AI. Sometimes a respondent is just too busy. They just throw the link into AI and they say, listen, go complete it for me. I'm too busy. So you want to have guardrails in place to make sure that whatever responses you are getting are real responses. And for me, that's why I prefer doing the in-person, because I feel like I'm there, I'm in control, and I'm able to ensure that the information that I'm getting is from a human. I know that AI gathers information from different humans, but remember, we want one response per one unique individual. We don't want an amalgamation from one person. So that's why I feel like that human interaction is so important in this day and age where we have AI that is moving and developing at such a rapid rate. Also, when you're sitting in front of a person, sometimes they rush a little bit less. And you're able to also see when they are rushing. Whereas even if it's, an online survey with someone in corporate who's very busy, or a teacher or a principal, behind the scenes, you don't know if they're rushing through a question, if they're just filling it out just for the sake of filling it out. People are so busy, and sometimes we don't blame them for doing these things. So you have to come up with that right balance to make sure that you're respecting the respondent's time, but you're also getting accurate, and authentic information. even when designing your questionnaires, make sure you can ask AI to assist you, with question ideas or checking your questions, but don't ask AI to design the questionnaire and then you just take that questionnaire at face value. You have to interrogate it. You have to understand what it's asking. Does what's showing on the paper, does it match your research questions and your main question? Is it helping you to answer what you need answered? And if it's not, and if the questions are vague and if they're ill-focused, then you have to take them and you have to do a considerable amount of adjusting and tweaking and things. Remember, AI can be wrong. AI has lots of errors in it. I know when I do research, sometimes it brings up fake sources. It brings up, fabricated articles, even fabricated news articles sometimes. So you have to be very, very careful. Don't take AI as like a 100% reliable, because sometimes it does hallucinate. So be a little bit fussy about that. Yes.
To interrupt, there's a question from the chat from Gilbert. According to UJ ethics, what protocols should we follow for encrypting data at rest and in transit when using mobile data collection platforms?
Prof. Mapela, are there any guidelines that we have for that?
Can you please repeat the question, Chair?
No problem. Let me just go up. The question
Sorry about
reads, no problem, Prof. According to UJ ethics, what protocols should we follow for encrypting data at rest and in transit when using mobile data collection platforms?
If I can give an answer here, I'll be fabricating a story here. I will talk from my own understanding and my supervision. I haven't allowed that when it comes to my own supervision, but supervisors differ. I prefer a sort of an exercise that is as human as possible. So if people are going to be using such tools, as long as the supervisor understands the reason and there's justification, and then it can be justified to ethics. Because remember, ethics is not supposed to gatekeep, it's supposed to work with you and minimize the risk. And if you can prove that the risk, what you're doing does not pose any risk, then it is okay. I would say so. That's what I would say to my students, but it depends again on a supervisor. But I haven't come across an application that states that they will be using such a tool. I haven't. It will be a lesson even to me. But remember, that ethics is there to support you. And should I not know this particular process you want to follow, it has to be justified. As long as there is no risk, then it should be okay.
Sorry, just to add, before you list the next question in Nkosietu, Gilbert, when you're looking at encryption, maybe encryption is a little bit too, I don't know. I don't know what your field, what's normal, or what's the convention in your field, but sometimes just having a simple password protected device is enough to keep data safe, or to have some sort of two-factor authentication or something like that. Sometimes you don't have to encrypt the data itself. You can have mobile devices that have very good access control. So sometimes that might be a useful middle ground. Encryption for individuals can be quite tricky. So maybe having just a basic two-factor password authentication might be a good middle ground. I hope that answers your question, Gilbert.
Thank you so much, colleagues. Now moving on to the next question from Elizabeth. Thank you so much, Prof. I have a question about using mixed method. I discovered that not not all my research objectives can be measured with the questionnaire. Hence, I want to ask that can questionnaire address some and interview questions address those that cannot be addressed by questionnaire? Or must both questionnaire and interview questions measure the same thing?
May I take that?
Yes, Prof, you can
Yes, please.
proceed.
Yes. That is why in your Form A, when you're applying for ethics, there's a section there that allows you to have multiple instruments for collecting data with a justification as to why you would use all those instruments. I'm not sure if the person who's asking is answered, or should I explain further?
Elizabeth, please confirm if your question is answered or you want Prof to elaborate.
But also remember, Elizabeth, that you can't have 3 instruments for the very same group. Remember that. It would be that you want to speak to policymakers, then you've got this instrument for them. You want to speak to communities, you've got this instrument for them. But at the end of the day, you want to tell a story from different perspectives. Elizabeth, are you answered?
Yes, Elizabeth said, please explain further, but I think that was a few minutes ago before you did explain, Prof.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Elizabeth, can you please confirm if you were answered? Now moving on to the next question. Okay, yeah, Elizabeth has confirmed, Prof, that she's answered. Now moving on to the next question from Jonathan. Are there restrictions for survey exercises in geographics outside South Africa?
Are there what?
Restrictions for survey exercises in geographies outside South Africa?
Not at all, not at all. But what would need to happen before we can approve that? There must be, say you want to go and speak to some institution in Kenya, just making an example. That institution must have approved your inquiry. So for you to get the approval from UJ, we must have evidence that they are waiting for you, they understand your study, and they are consenting to this by writing a letter to you. Of course, you would have written a letter before to explain to them what you would like to do. So that is permissible. If you are working with another university, which is outside of South Africa, that is also doable. But now we need to understand if ethics has been approved with the other researchers outside of SA, if their ethics has been approved, and then they also want to know if we've approved you to do research outside of SA with the group of a particular institution outside of SA. It takes a bit longer because you've got to wait for the letters, not from us internally, but from the other country where you want to do research. Jonathan, you answered? Jonathan? Okay.
You got the confirmation from Jonathan. Thank you so much, Prof, and thank you to the colleagues who have asked their questions. Remember, colleagues, I've enabled everyone's mic, so if you would prefer to speak, you can just raise a hand, and therefore you can unmute your mic. Dr. Rashid, I think you are good to proceed. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Oh, I think Jonathan has another question. His hand is up.
Yeah, Jonathan, you can unmute your mic.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prof, for answering my question. I think I didn't get the entity that must provide a letter to the student. I don't know. Is it another university outside of South Africa? Let's say if it's you are conducting a survey exercise in a country that is, let's say, the DRC, for example, okay, and you are performing your activities, let's say in a rural area somewhere there. So you're not dealing with a university. Who should give you the authorization or send you the letter for the ethics committee to approve?
Okay, Jonathan, thank you. That is another stream that is also doable if there is a traditional authority in that rural area, of which is always the case. Judging from SA, I don't know outside of SA, we will need a letter that states that you've spoken to the tribal authority there and they understand what you're going to be doing within the community, and they give you that letter to say we consent to this study. But then if you are going to Kenya just to speak to, or to the DRC just to speak to the public randomly, you cannot get a letter from anywhere. But we won't ask for that because in your methodology you would have stated what you're going to do.
Thank you. Thank you very much. But that's acceptable, right? So even if you,
Yes.
okay, as long as
Yes.
it's stated in the methodology.
Yes, as long as it's stated, and your safety is very important. But even the participants from Congo, we must make sure that you don't go there and you sort of undermine them in terms of your questioning. So we look out for you, we look out for them too.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Prof. That's clear.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. Dr. Rashid, you can proceed.
Thanks, everyone. So your bias also has a role to play in whatever instrument you choose to use or whatever technology you choose to use, because it affects coverage. So if you have a web-only survey, it means that you might cater to only certain segments of the population. So for example, you might end up overrepresenting maybe younger, wealthier, tech-savvy respondents. So that's why, earlier I mentioned that when you are doing things in different parts of South Africa, make sure you understand who your respondents are so that the mode that you choose actually is the correct mode and can help you get the most possible information in the easiest possible way. So make sure you do that so that you can account for bias. There are issues in terms of, or specific sources of bias that you'd have to bear in mind. Again, having a mixed method approach sometimes will help you fill any gaps in terms of excluding parts of the target population. So sometimes it gets tricky in terms of what information you are looking for. So that's why it's important to also, given whatever your research questions are, is to even test, gathering of that data in different locations to see whether you are getting the same information and whether you are reaching who you need to reach. And sometimes having different ways of asking questions can help you also detect whether you are missing some important players in that specific domain. Your sampling error, so sometimes we accidentally or unintentionally end up interviewing a subset of a population, like a very, very specific subset. So for example, maybe unemployed females between the ages of 20 and 30. So that's why you have to make sure there is some variation in the data that you collect. So, variation in terms of gender, in terms of age, income, so that your sample is as representative as possible. You also need to cover for non-response. So in your large data collection exercises, your large survey data, non-response is included so that you can see how many people did not respond. But now that's in cases where you're dealing with, 10,000 observations. If you are dealing with maybe 10 companies, obviously you're not going to include non-response in the same way. You may end up filling that gap. So for example, if out of the 10 businesses you wanted to interview, only 8 of them were successfully interviewed, then you may have to go and find 2 more businesses that you can interview so that you can make sure you hit your target of 10. But obviously it depends on what you're trying to do. But yeah, your non-response error is definitely accounted for differently in smaller samples than it is for larger samples. Obviously, we mentioned this one before, measurement error. Make sure your question is able to obtain the right information that you need. Make sure that your wording is consistent so that you can get the right answers. Not the right answers, but appropriate answers. Answers that you can use to answer your specific research sub-questions. Just to link to what you asked earlier, Jonathan, in those cross-border studies or international studies, informed consent is critical. That's also something else that protects you and the potential respondents. Regardless of whether you're doing the survey online or in person, you always have to have some form of informed consent, and that will be submitted with your ethics application. It's part and parcel of your entire application. Make sure you collect only data that you need, right? So collect only what your research question requires. So you can leave out any information that you feel might not be relevant. I'm not saying delete it. I'm saying just park it. Have a space where if a respondent gives you extra information, you know what to do with that extra information. It might not be relevant to that specific research question, but it might be relevant to context or to something else. So don't throw it away, but make sure you have a mechanism in place to help you identify what data there is useful for you and what data you can put aside and perhaps use at another stage. Then security, yes, encryption or password protection is very important. Some apps do allow for encryption as well, but obviously you have to know what the costs are. And you also have to have a very clear budget. So if you are doing your own primary data collection, you want to encrypt, know how much these apps are going to cost you, know how much it's going to cost to travel, ask maybe like AI to draw you up like a dummy budget, and then you can use that budget, adapt it for your specific costs. So you don't obviously, what your context is, so you'll be able to adapt it, but at least you're not starting from scratch, because then your AI can give you an idea of what are the kinds of things you should be budgeting for. A few years back, a colleague of mine did field work, but then didn't budget appropriately. So they only ended up collecting, I think, 36 of the 100 respondents that they were aiming for. So what that meant was that they had to go and apply now, for additional funding so that they could actually cover that shortfall. So that delayed them a lot. So that's why I'm saying, make sure you plan appropriately. You know what your budget is, so that when you're out there collecting your data, you can collect everything that you need and you don't have to be going back and forth to the field. Now, this is the very, very tiring part of qualitative data, right? Actually analyzing this information. You get paragraphs and paragraphs or recordings and recordings of information, and it is so much to deal with. So I do have some links to YouTube videos that take you through the exact steps that you would follow. So if ever you are keen for those videos, you are welcome to email me. But there are 3 main stages you'd have to do. You'd first have to make sense of the data. So you're going to have to read it, understand, what is happening. Are there any duplications? Is this response AI generated, or is it genuinely a human response? So you'd first have to just get a feel for what are the kinds of answers you received, from the survey. And then after you've read through all of your responses, then it's time for you to now find the common patterns, the cross tabulations, any common themes that might arise. So it's very, very exhausting because sometimes one answer leads to many different themes and many different research questions. So you do have to be quite mentally awake, to notice what's coming out of these responses. So I know that a lot of people like to listen to music, for example, when they're doing their research, because that helps them focus and analyze properly. So, if that works for you, then you do that. Others like to have total silence so that they can focus on all of the different patterns. That's more like me. I prefer there to be silence so I can actually think and process all of the different themes that have come out. But obviously, you have to do something that works for you and something that helps you to find all of the themes in each of your respondents' answers. With qualitative data, you can visualize and interpret, but make sure that you are doing so in a way that isn't misleading. So sometimes there are small differences within groups or between groups, and that is magnified so much because of the way the researcher decided to present the data. So, acknowledge it. If you are in your limitations section, if you are picking up that there are some small differences, just name it up front. You don't have to hide that, in your limitation section, say, listen, this was the issue. Because we interviewed a subset of this particular sample, we do have an over-exaggeration of this very specific group. So in the next study, it might be wise for us to, look at different kinds of groups so that we can vary in terms of those differences between groups. But obviously, again, number 3 depends on what your research questions are. You can't just visualize everything at the same time, but you also want to use these tools to get your message across. So a nice balance between, visualization and text, is a good middle ground. I'm not going to go through this in too much detail because it's more of a quantitative angle, but anything that you use, even there are software out there that look like Atlas TI and things that helps you analyze qualitative data. You can use that. You can use whatever software there is, but you have to remember that you are the custodian of the study. You are the custodian of that data. So you need to make sure that whatever you are putting out there is reliable. So regardless of what software you use, even in Stata, you'll have to, if you're running some sort of statistical model, you must be able to reproduce the syntax so that you can run it again and get the same answers again. So that's why it's so important to have these checks and balances in place. Even with qualitative apps, the same rule applies. Always be honest in terms of what is missing in your survey data. So sometimes there's like a reporting issue. Sometimes, for example, in a specific area, maybe you couldn't get hold of, 5 people. That's a serious, reporting issue, and you have to work towards closing that gap. Another thing is people do like to overclaim with qualitative work. It's very important for you to not generalize. Make sure that whatever information you are presenting there is an adequate reflection of what information is actually out there. Reviewers tend to the go-to comment from them is the sample isn't representative or the sample is too small. So you must in advance already know how you're going to actually address this. Or the response rate is too low to trust. Same story. As Prof. Mapela mentioned earlier, you must know how to go about finding ways to make sure your information is as reliable as possible. Also, remember, non-response bias is there. So make sure you account for that, regardless of whether you're doing a larger sample or a smaller sample, you do have to account for non-response. You need to be able to explain to the reader, how did you account for non-response? So did you go out and did you find new respondents, or you just leaving the old responses out? Like, what is your game plan? in terms of your response rates. Okay, so I think we do have some time now, about 15 minutes for questions. Maybe we can take more questions. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your research. And then I know everyone is doing different things. So there might be something that's, disturbing you in your work that you might want to talk about. It's a very safe space. So please share, your individual research, individual concerns. Tell us about the trouble that you're experiencing. And just before we take more questions, when you are completing the survey that's put now in the chat by Nkosietu, make sure you answer honestly so that we can improve for the next time. I'm not just saying that. I genuinely want to improve so that we can make this workshop accessible to everyone. So if there's something you would have liked to see done differently, like more examples or some practicals or something, just please tell us in that form so that we can improve for the next time and make sure we cater for everyone adequately the next time. And Nkosietu, I'll hand back to you. My presentation is done, but I really, really would like more questions from the audience.
And thank you so much, Dr. Rashid and and Prof. Mapela for such a great and informative presentation. We really do appreciate your expertise and the information that you have shared with all of us here. So there's a question on the chat from Michael. I see that Jenny also answered that question, but I'll just read all the questions and answer, and therefore where you can add, you can. Michael from Michael reads, thanks for the presentation and explanation. My research is based in Kenya. Do I need to get ethical approval from both Kenya and UJ over and above adherence to POPIA and the Data Protection Act? And Jenny answered that question. I come from Uganda and I'm conducting research both in Uganda and SA. I had to get approval from SA and Uganda. That because to collect data in Uganda, you must get ethical approval, even if you have approval from the institution outside Uganda. So check with your country. Most universities have a national body they work with. In my country, we have the Uganda National Council of Science and Technology. So you can use that or any university accredited by them. I'm sure there's an equivalent of the same in your country. Hope this helps. So from Prof. Mapela and Dr. Rashid, you want to add something regarding this question from Michael and what Jenny have said regarding that?
Okay, I'll come in. Jenny is correct. Then I wonder what would we do if we have someone who wants to speak to people from Kenya, not anyone who's affiliated with any institution. I'm just wondering, but Jenny is correct. Is correct. You have to get approval if it's academic related. But if you want to speak to people who are selling in the streets of Kenya, I wonder who do you speak to? Maybe speak to the government, the national department. Probably it has got an ethics reg office for dealing with people in Kenya. I don't know, but Jenny is correct.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof, for that. I'll come back to you, Dinzalo. I'll just go through the chats first and finish them, and therefore I will take the hands after. So there's a question from Getlaren. What softwares can one use to transcribe data from interview question before doing analysis?
Just for clarity, do you mean you've recorded it and you want assistance with transcription? Is that what you mean? Because if that's the case, then the easiest way, because if you're a UJ student, you already have access to Microsoft Teams, right? So then that's why using Microsoft Teams automatically in there, when you have a recording, it transcribes for you. It provides you with a full transcript by the end of the interview or the end of the session. So try and use apps easy apps that help you transcribe easily. Another thing you can do, there is voice software. So if you use one of those, those recorders, there is software where you can put it through. I can't remember the name of the software, but let me get back to you on that because I used it once. Not Handbrake, the other one. But let me get Lorraine, let me put that in the chat in the next few minutes. I just want to get the name right. But please let me know if that is what you were referring to or if it's something else.
Thank you, Dr. Rashid. Ketlareng, you can just unmute your mic if you want to elaborate further regarding your question, or just type under the chat. I'm now moving on to Ditwalo. You can unmute your mic.
Thank you very much, moderator, and good morning, still morning. I joined late. I had other commitments, but I've got two questions related to what is being discussed. The first question is in relation to the survey that I'm conducting for my PhD research. The concern or the challenge that I'm having is slow responses. I've launched this survey on Google almost 2 months ago. I have informed people via my LinkedIn page, WhatsApps, and other social media platforms. However, the expected responses is not as I thought it will be. So I just want to check from you what can I do to encourage people to respond? Of course, this one is for everyone. What other platforms? What can I do to really get the target that I've planned to get? Because I'm struggling in that area. The second question is because I'm doing a mixed method. I want to confirm with you if the interviews can be done on not face to face, not online, but as sort of like questionnaires on Google, so that it's easy to analyze. Send out those questions and people respond on Google in typing. Can that be considered as an interview? Thank you.
Doc, you want to take it?
No, you can take it, Prof. I'll add.
What was it, Tinzalo? Am I right?
Correct.
Yes.
Yes, Tinzalo, we've discussed this earlier on that with the different methods of collecting data, there are pros and cons, and this is exactly what we are experiencing. It does happen even if you do a face-to-face, you can have an appointment and they would turn you back and then tell you come the other week, you come the other week. It's the same story, but it's a bit better there because they get off sort of tired of seeing your face. Eventually they respond. But with the Google Forms one, I've had a student who had to take leave because he was already behind and there was an F7 hanging, and then we had to what do you call it? We had to motivate for him to be able to be accepted back. So he had to take leave and change the whole thing and go and knock at people's doors and speak to them. These were policymakers. So it's the nature of the beast. Maybe you have to be patient, but I don't think you've got the time. must you give up asking or reminding people? You can rely on that, but you must have a time frame so that you can change the course of action. When I say the course of action, how best can you do this? Must you take time and go and visit people? And if they are scattered everywhere, that's another challenge. So you'll have to be patient. It depends again on your sample size. And then your second question was?
Was with the interviews. Is it permitted to do interviews not on still on Google Form instead of meeting them face to face? You just create a Google Form with those questions and they respond instead, because I feel like it will be easier to analyze this data because it's already written, you know, other than sitting with them and engaging on a one-on-one physical basis. Is that permitted in research?
If you were my student, I would advise for a Teams call in support of the challenges that you're facing. And then I would advise you to set up a meeting and have a Teams call. That one would be better because your data will also be captured during the meeting when you do the recording. Doc, you want to add there?
Thanks, Prof. Tinswalo. I think with that one, remember with interviews, you need to actually be speaking directly to the person. Whereas if you just give them a Google form, it sort of becomes like the same thing as a questionnaire. And then you won't be able to ask them open-ended questions as well. So I agree with what Prof is suggesting on the Teams call. Try and find like a middle ground, you know, especially with non-response. I don't know what your ethics application permitted you to do, but sometimes if people are having difficulties completing a Google form, it might be easier to identify the participant and talk to them and help them fill out the Google form. You're not filling it out for them. You're basically serving as a transcriber yourself, because sometimes it's quicker for someone to tell you their responses and you capture it than for them to actually sit at the phone or the computer and actually do it. So maybe something like that, depending on what you received ethical clearance for, might be a way for you to you know, get more responses and move forward a little bit with your research. Does that answer your question, Tinswalo?
Very well, thank you.
Can I add, Tinswalo? I have a good example for you. I had an interview guide. I went to a province and one participant requested that I email the interview guide. And then the other one requested that we sit down. Of course, the intention was to sit down with them. The other one, they are both busy, but the other one was not comfortable if he understood exactly what was put on the paper. I don't want to mention the literacy levels, but the one that requested that I email this, who gave me sufficient answers, was a bit very educated. The other one, they're running the same businesses, but the other one was not educated, but is doing well. He was comfortable with me sitting down with them. So when we talk about ethics, we require you to be ethical when we are navigating all these challenges, so long as you know that whichever process that you might have to migrate to, it's still ethical.
I see a thumbs up from Tinswalo. Thank you so much, Prof, and to you, Dr. Rashid. There's another question from Matthew. I have also discovered that sequencing in terms of respondent is also important. At times, a subsequent respondent provided that data that I needed up filling it required me to go back to the previous participants. That becomes a challenge, especially when it comes when resources are limited. So that was a contribution from Matthew. I see there's a hand from Tendai, and I see that you have your question under the chat. So just open your mic and also combine the two questions that you might have, including the one that you just posted under the chat. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and also thank you, Prof. Mapela and Doc Rashid for the wonderful presentation. I wanted to say I'm also facing a challenge in a certain project that I'm doing that the previous speaker is pointed at. The issue of low response in the dispatched questionnaire. So I dispatched the questionnaire and there is a very limited response to the Google form. So I was asking if it is advisable to combine with a digital kind of data collection tool like the Kobo Toolbox so that I can complement the data that I have so far. And then with the Kobo Toolbox data collection on site, is that advisable? I submit.
Thank you, Tendai. I wouldn't allow my student to do that. I still do things in an old fashion, but I'm sure Dr. Rashid has got a better insight. From my side, I wouldn't allow my student to do that. Is there something wrong with that? No, but the low response does not mean that there's something wrong with your research. Maybe we've got to find ways. And if this is the solution you're coming up with and it's permissible, maybe it's okay. Doc, can you assist?
Thanks, Prof. So, Tendai, I think Kobo Toolbox is a good way to consolidate all of your information. I think that's a slightly different thing from participation. So normally when I also have participation issues, the easiest ways I identify people who I want to be respondents. And then I contact them and then I help them fill out the Google form. You're not fabricating data. You're literally putting what they are telling you into the Google form. Sometimes there are technological barriers that prevent someone from completing a form. Sometimes someone starts the form and then they don't finish it. Or sometimes silly things like load shedding or no water for the day. So sometimes just making it simpler for them, just helping them with with their inconvenience will help them actually complete their form. Kobo, I think you can use more if you have all of your data already, because I know its strength lies in its analysis. Yeah, but if you now design the form again in Kobo, I don't think you're going to improve your response rates, because people are still going to see the Kobo form and think, oh, okay, they're going to experience the same issues. So regardless of whether you're using Google Form or Kobo, you'd have to go one step further in getting, the participants to respond. So you'd basically have to go a step further and understand what are their challenges so that you can actually help them overcome their challenges. Does that make sense, Tendai?
Okay, I see a thumbs up from Tendai. Prof. Mapela, I see your hand is up. Want to add something?
Yes. To all the participants, maybe this is going to make your day, but it's not going to help you, but it's going to make your day. It happens to the best of us. The research I'm doing, I started it in 2018. I could only start publishing in 2021. Yes, my first publication was in 2021 because everyone I was talking to was sort of wondering why this research. So as a result, the response was very, very low. But if you believe in what you're doing, you try and find ways. So eventually I found a forum where all the participants from their different formations, they meet once a month. So I had to speak to the municipality. I was invited out of Gauteng. I was invited and I was given a platform to explain what I'm trying to do and the importance of the study. That is when now people started responding. That's when I managed to collect data, but the challenges are not the same. but it does happen. It does happen, and I know that you are pressed with time. Maybe there's no time to do that, but you've got to find ways if you believe in what you're doing. As Jonathan is saying, as Tendai is saying that what about if I use this? If it's not working, continue probing. Something will work.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof, for that. I hope Tendai and the colleagues, you are well answered. I don't see any new questions from the chat. Ketlaring, can you please confirm if you saw the message that Dr. Rashid shared regarding your question earlier for those tools? She said something under the chat. Probably one question from my side, it's regarding ethical approval. If I'm collecting data from 3 different companies, does that mean I have to get approval from each company? So if I'm doing now an ethical application, I should submit 3 different letters from each company. And also, if I'm doing a mixed method, does that mean I have to include 2 consent form for qualitative and quantitative? I hope my question is clear.
Okay. Remember the consent form and the cover letter explains the study. So that can be one. But the instruments will differ because Form A will allow you to justify as to why we are using the 2 instruments and your methodology. What was the first question, which was also very important?
Regarding collecting data from 3 different companies, should I get approval from all those 3 companies and submit letters for each?
Yes, if it's different companies that have got no relationship with each other, then you have to. But if you're speaking to the head office and you want to speak to the subsidiaries, the head office can give you the letter which states that you will be speaking to the different subsidiaries under that head office. But if it's different companies, you have to get the letter from all those companies. Because should you get a letter from one company and should I approve it, and the other 2 companies happen to get hold of what you would have published and they say we did not consent to this, the whole study now will be affected.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. I think I'm well answered regarding that question. Colleagues, anyone who still have a question, I see that time is now against us. However, if you still have any pending question, we can make a provision for you to ask those questions. I've also shared the feedback evaluation link under the chat. Colleagues, we kindly request you to take your 3 minutes to fill in the feedback. The feedback will be shared with the facilitators, and also the certificate of attendance we will take, we will send the certificate of attendance based on the feedback. So if you have completed the feedback, that is whereby we can issue the certificate of attendance. To those colleagues who have emailed us regarding the certificate of attendance for the past workshops, we'll be resending those certificates, those colleagues who requested to amend their certificate. So we will issue new certificates for them. I don't see any new questions from the chat. Probably any, okay, I see Sunny, you can unmute your mic before we can close.
Yes, thank you so much, Chair. Good afternoon to the profs who just presented. I didn't have any question. I'm sorry to raise my hand this late, but I think it was prompted by the Chair what you were asking. Just a brief one. I'm doing research in engineering management. This is my first time ever doing quantitative and qualitative. It's a huge struggle. While at the same time I'm doing my research, I'm learning because my undergrad, my BTech, I did research methodology, but obviously, you know, it was those questions It was where you go and write the exam, and they'll ask you types of quantitative and qualitative. It was not the application. So things are really different from our side. So I'm just layering this so that my question might seem, I don't know, very not strong enough. I don't know, but Chair, you were just asking now to Prof. So I just want to get a clarity. For example, I've applied for my ethical clearance maybe a month ago. I tried to make follow-up, but there was no response. And remember, this is my first time. I don't even know the process of ethical clearance. But I want to ask, I will do follow-up again. Maybe I'll just go to Phoebe, like there at DFC myself. I want to ask, so I'm doing the mixed method, and I did mention everything in my proposal that it includes these specific companies. Overall, the name is Foundry Industries in South Africa. There are no specific names of the companies, but it's just Foundry, as long as it's Foundry. So now, once I get the ethical clearance, can I use it like for both quantitative and qualitative, and to whatever foundry that I've chosen and best fits my population and sampling? So I think that's where I want to get the clarity from what Chair you were asking. So, but in my method, in my proposal, I've mentioned everything, that it will be a mixed method and motivated why, and spoke about the foundry industry. So it means when they give me the feedback on the ethical clearance and they approve and give me to go in and interview these companies, will that incorporate everything to say I can go to any company, I can do interviews, I can do questionnaires? I'm not sure if my question makes sense. Thank you.
It is very clear. Your name is?
Anazo.
Anazo, your question is very, very clear, and it's very important. Let me tell you why.
Okay.
That ethics clearance process is very, very important, because if you are not mentioning the companies, you're just speaking to the sector. How you've phrased your questions will determine whether you need the approval from that company you would have randomly chosen. So if you say you speak to universities, now you want to speak to universities in South Africa, and you choose me as an academic, and you ask me about UJ processes, then we are in trouble. UJ must approve. I cannot say anything on behalf of UJ. But if you ask me, it speaks to your instrument again. If you ask me generally, as an academic, how do you juggle home life, personal life, work life, and the resilience you have to carry the students? That is me talking about me as an academic. But if you're going to ask me as to what kind of a support does UJ give me, then I'll be speaking on behalf of UJ. You would need, before you can start engaging with us from UJ, you would need approval from UJ. So now what's going to assist you is how you've phrased your questions.
Okay.
Does that help you?
It really does, 100%, Prof. I wasn't aware of such.
Yes.
Thank you
Yes.
so much.
So what is your second concern? Or the waiting period? No.
Yes, the waiting period. And the thing is, Prof, you don't. Oh, sorry. I just want to say this, Prof. The thing is, now we don't want to be looked as students who are very pushy, who are very like behind people. We know everyone is busy, including academics and those who deal with administration. But I feel like sometimes for someone who doesn't know, especially with my follow-up that I did mention that I've never done it. I don't know the process. So at least if you get a reply to say, okay, thank you, Anazo, for the email, please note, maybe the people are going to meet and this is how the process works. So expect to wait for 2 months or so. It will give you an idea. So I think the frustration is when people just keep quiet, you don't get any response from the follow-up, and then you are sitting there frustrated and all of that. Yeah, so thank you, Prof. You can continue.
Yes, I said earlier on, as a research institution and being the ethics chair of SOE, This is just an administration for me. I've got other boxes that I need to tick. So when a researcher sends me an email, if a number of days lapse without me having acknowledged that email, that application, it says something about me as a person who chose this portfolio. Doesn't mean that I should drop everything and reply to you, but at some point, as a research institution, it's incumbent on me to ensure that I make you aware that I have received your application. And you have a right to ask, even if it wasn't ethics. If you send me an email at a CBE asking for something from me that pertains to what I do, and I don't respond, you have a right to prompt me again to say, I'm still waiting. How far is this query? You have a right.
Okay. No, clear, Prof. Thank you so much. Much appreciated.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anazo and Prof. I don't see any new question. Just to add on your question, Anazo, you mentioned that you are from Phoebe, right?
Yes, Chair.
Yes. So I got an email because I'm also from Phoebe. So I got an email. So apparently today there was a workshop that was organized by the faculty regarding the application, ethical application processes. So if you maybe just go to the faculty and ask or request for a recording of that workshop that they did today. So I think that will help you even better.
Definitely. I'll go there tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Okay. So I don't see any further questions. Colleagues, thank you so much for such a great and engaging session. Thank you to you, Prof. Mapela, and to you, Dr. Rashid. This was very informative and insightful session. We really do appreciate your expertise and taking your time in facilitating this kind of workshop. And to all our colleagues who have attended this workshop, thank you so much. And remember to fill in the feedback so that we can share it out with our facilitators for today. So before I can close the session, probably any last word from your side, Prof. Mapela, and to you, Dr. Rashid, before we can officially end this workshop.
I will hand over to Dr. Rashid.
Sorry, Nkosietu, are you asking us to close off? I missed that.
Yes, probably if you have any last words that you would like to share with the rest of the colleagues before we can officially close the session.
No, firstly, just to say thank you to you. I feel that everything was so well organized from your side. Thank you so much for always helping us so promptly and for being, the muscle behind the scenes. I know it's tough. You have a lot of these workshops on at the same time. So thank you so much for all your help. And just to everyone who attended, I know it's tough. You're busy with research and there's so much going on. In your respective faculties, there are lots of support groups and forums where you can ask these questions, even if you form as a group yourself in this, everyone who attended here, if you form your own forum, it's a very useful way to help each other. This data collection procedures and things can be very frustrating. I'm not, saying that it's easy in any way. So make sure you have some sort of support, even at the Writing Center at UJ. They do offer support both at the postgrad school, but also the other Writing Center. So just make sure you reach out whenever you need help. And then even if, I can't help or Writing Center can't help, we'll definitely refer you to someone who can assist you. So please don't suffer in silence. Make sure you reach out to us. And thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much once again to you, Dr. Rashid, and to Prof. Mapela, and to all the colleagues for taking your time in joining us today in this very important discussion. We do hope and believe that those colleagues who have joined us, they have learned something. Those who are in their research journeys, they will go and apply those techniques to their research, and those who are supervising, they will go and share with their students as well. So thank you so much to everyone. I'm now officially ending this session. The recording will be available to all our platforms, and we will be sending out the certificate of attendance. And I will also be sharing the feedback as well as the full attendance register or report for this workshop to you, Prof. Mapela, and to you, Dr. Rashid. With that being said, thank you so much, colleagues. You can have a great day further. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Yeah.